Every single loss, every blown account, every frustrating cycle of inconsistency in trading can be traced back to one source. That source is not your chart setup. It is not your entry strategy. It is not even your choice of market. The origin is inside your own head. It is your mindset. If the mental software you run is amateur by design, then it will sabotage you before you even click the button. It will make you chase excitement instead of probabilities. It will make you cling to the need to be right instead of following rules. It will make you avoid small planned pain only to invite catastrophic unplanned damage. That is the amateur software. It is built on flawed protocols, reactive impulses, and emotional shortcuts. It will trick you into thinking you are in control while quietly dismantling your edge. In contrast, the professional system is something entirely different. It does not care about one trade, one win, or one loss. It is engineered to survive a series, to play the long game, and to deliver statistical superiority over time. It is rule-bound, disciplined, predictive rather than reactive. It does not chase dopamine. It does not tie self-worth to outcomes. It is a quiet, durable framework designed to extract consistency from chaos. This video is not about strategies or secret indicators. This is a blueprint. You are about to see exactly how to strip away the amateur software that is running your decisions and replace it with a professional system from the ground up. Build the architecture of your trading mind properly, and everything else you want in this game will follow. The amateur trading mindset operates as a faulty operating system. It is not a single bad habit, but an interlocking network of protocols that run in the background, quietly dictating behavior and generating predictable mistakes. To dismantle this system, we must break it down into its core components and expose the hidden logic that makes it so destructive. There are three protocols at the heart of the amateur system: the validation protocol, the pain avoidance protocol, and the dopamine chase protocol. Each one appears rational on the surface, but each is fundamentally flawed, pushing traders into reactive cycles that erode both capital and confidence. The validation protocol is the need to be right. Beneath the surface, this protocol ties personal identity and self-worth directly to the outcome of individual trades. Every position becomes a test of competence, a referendum on intelligence, and even a measurement of value as a human being. When the mind is running this protocol, being wrong feels intolerable. It is not just a financial loss, it feels like a personal defeat. This emotional attachment warps decision-making. Instead of executing rules, the trader bends rules to avoid admitting error. Stop losses are moved further away. Small planned losses are ignored. Unrealistic conviction is doubled down on because closing the trade would mean accepting a mistake. The underlying error in this protocol is simple. Markets are probabilistic systems. No individual outcome defines skill. The need for constant validation blinds the trader to this fact, turning a statistical game into a personal drama. The pain avoidance protocol is the instinct to resist discomfort. Losses, even when small and planned, trigger a primal urge to escape. The amateur mind interprets cutting a trade as punishment, a failure to endure, or a betrayal of conviction. Because of this, the pain avoidance protocol overrides logic and pushes the trader to hold losers far longer than winners. Instead of honoring stop levels, positions are allowed to expand into drawdowns. The hidden assumption is that avoiding short-term discomfort will protect from long-term pain. The truth is the opposite. By refusing to face controlled losses, the amateur system guarantees uncontrolled ones. The logic flaw is clear. Discipline is about absorbing discomfort early so that capital and psychological energy are preserved later. Avoidance is not protection. It is magnification of damage. The dopamine chase protocol is the compulsion to trade for stimulation rather than for edge. This protocol hijacks the brain's reward system. Every notification, every flashing candle, every potential setup triggers anticipation. Entering a position provides an immediate chemical reward regardless of the quality of the trade. Winning amplifies this reward, but even losing can reinforce the cycle if it promises the chance to win it back. The amateur system running this protocol confuses action with progress. More trades feel like more control. More entries feel like more opportunity. In reality, this protocol strips away patience, erodes selectivity, and ensures overexposure to randomness. The core error is mistaking excitement for profitability. Edge in markets is statistical and often boring. Chasing stimulation guarantees variance without advantage. Together, these three protocols form a closed loop. The need for validation makes the trader attach ego to outcomes. The avoidance of pain prevents acceptance of small, necessary losses. The chase for dopamine compels overtrading to seek emotional relief. Each feeds the other, creating a cycle where losses reinforce the need to be right. Avoidance amplifies the damage, and the chase demands immediate recovery. The amateur mind becomes a machine of self-sabotage, perfectly calibrated to destroy confidence and equity over time. To analyze these protocols more deeply, we must examine their triggers, behaviors, and logical flaws in detail. The validation protocol is triggered by uncertainty. Every time the market moves against a position, the question of competence arises. Instead of accepting randomness, the mind interprets this as a threat to self-image. The behaviors that follow are denial, justification, and distortion of rules. The logical flaw is assuming that skill guarantees outcome. In truth, skill only guarantees advantage across a large sample. No single trade validates or invalidates competence. The pain avoidance protocol is triggered by anticipated discomfort. Every planned stop, every disciplined exit represents the acceptance of being wrong. The behaviors that follow are delay, rationalization, and hope. The logical flaw is assuming that postponing pain makes it disappear. In truth, the market compounds discomfort when it is ignored, turning controlled losses into uncontrolled spirals. The professional mind accepts pain as a cost of doing business. The amateur mind resists it until it grows unbearable. The dopamine chase protocol is triggered by boredom and restlessness. Markets often spend long stretches in noise without clear signals. The amateur mind, addicted to stimulation, cannot tolerate this neutrality. The behaviors that follow are impulsive entries, strategy hopping, and exaggerated position sizes. The logical flaw is assuming that action equals progress. In reality, profitability is created by waiting for asymmetric setups and applying rules consistently. Activity for its own sake produces variance without direction. These three protocols can be understood as corrupted mental shortcuts. They are adaptive in other parts of life but maladaptive in markets. Validation is useful in environments where effort and outcome are tightly linked, such as academic tests or physical training. Pain avoidance is useful when discomfort signals danger. Dopamine chasing is useful when exploration leads to survival opportunities. But in markets where randomness and probability dominate, these shortcuts backfire. The amateur system is essentially the misapplication of ancient instincts to a modern probabilistic game. The reason traders struggle for years is not lack of intelligence or effort. It is because these protocols are invisible. They run automatically, disguised as reasonable instincts. A trader may think they are being disciplined when they refuse to close a loser, believing conviction is strength. They may think they are being ambitious when they trade more, believing activity is progress. They may think they are protecting their self-respect by refusing to admit mistakes. In reality, each of these is the amateur software executing faulty code. Recognizing these protocols is the first step. They cannot be outwilled by sheer effort. The harder one fights them directly, the stronger they become, because resistance reinforces their presence. The solution lies in uninstalling them, stripping away their hidden influence, and replacing them with a professional framework that operates on logic and probability rather than emotion and instinct. This detailed analysis is not meant to shame the trader, but to expose the operating system as it truly is. The amateur system is predictable, and predictability is an advantage. Once the protocols are mapped, they can be dismantled. Once the errors are exposed, they can be corrected. Every trader who transitions to professionalism makes this shift, from running flawed emotional software to running a disciplined statistical system. The process begins here, with the clear recognition that the amateur system is not who you are. It is simply faulty code that has been running in the background waiting to be overwritten. The turning point in trading psychology does not come from discovering a new indicator or memorizing another strategy. It comes from realizing that the amateur software cannot be patched. It must be uninstalled. The old system cannot be reformed because its protocols are built on false assumptions. The need to be right, the avoidance of pain, and the chase for dopamine will always lead to distortion. The breakthrough happens when you stop trying to force new methods on top of faulty code and instead recognize that the operating system itself has to change. Think of it this way. If you try to drive a nail into wood using a banana, it does not matter how much strength you apply or how carefully you position your hand. The tool is wrong for the task. You will exhaust yourself and achieve nothing. The amateur mind is that banana. It is soft, reactive, and not designed for the job. The professional system is the hammer. It is precise, durable, and capable of executing the task repeatedly without distortion. The realization that you have been trying to trade with the wrong tool is both humbling and liberating. It means that failure was not because of lack of effort, but because of misaligned design. This shift is about uninstalling, not adding. You are not here to learn endless new tricks. You are here to strip away illusions. The amateur system thrives on clutter, on chasing every new method and every emotional impulse. The professional system thrives on simplicity, on rules that are applied consistently. The pivot is not about accumulation, but elimination. By removing the protocols that hijack your decisions, you create the space for clarity and neutrality. At this stage, the trader moves from being reactive to becoming proactive. Instead of reacting to the market's moves with emotional impulses, you begin to anticipate your own mind's tendencies. You stop being surprised by fear, greed, or boredom. You expect them, prepare for them, and design systems that neutralize them. This is the beginning of true professionalism, recognizing that trading is not about controlling the market, but about controlling the operating system that engages with it. This turning point is a psychological reset. It is the moment you stop asking how to predict the market and start asking how to engineer your own behavior. It is the realization that the real edge lies not in forecasting, but in disciplined execution. From this moment forward, you are not fighting the market. You are building the architecture of a system that will carry you through randomness with consistency. This recognition is the gateway from the amateur loop into the professional path. To detach yourself from outcome is to fundamentally rewire the relationship between identity and results. In trading, outcomes are uncertain, probabilistic, and outside of your control once you place a trade. Yet, the amateur mind fuses self-worth to each individual outcome. This fusion is the root of destructive cycles. Every win inflates ego. Every loss wounds self-image. The trader becomes addicted to the emotional roller coaster of being validated or invalidated by random short-term results. Detachment breaks this toxic link and restores clarity. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean that results are irrelevant or that you should ignore performance. What it means is that you stop treating results as a mirror of identity. The outcome of a trade is feedback for your process, not a verdict on who you are. The professional mind separates the two. Identity is anchored in discipline and consistency. Results are simply data points that confirm or challenge the process. This separation creates freedom. You are free to act without the weight of ego. You are free to close a trade without drama. You are free to record a loss without spiraling into self-doubt. The outcome no longer controls you because you no longer confuse it with your self-worth. To understand why detachment is essential, consider the probabilistic nature of markets. A setup with a genuine edge may win only 55% of the time. That means 45% of trades will lose even if executed perfectly. If your identity is tied to each trade, then 45% of the time you will experience an ego wound. Over a large sample, this is unsustainable. No one can tolerate being told they are wrong nearly half the time without emotional breakdown. The professional mindset avoids this trap by detaching. A loss is not being wrong. A loss is simply part of the distribution. Detachment allows you to hold this truth emotionally, not just intellectually. Applying detachment requires deliberate practice. The first step is to redefine what you measure. Instead of asking, "Did I win or lose?" you ask, "Did I follow my rules?" Success is defined as alignment with process, not outcome. This shift changes the emotional reward system. You begin to feel satisfaction when you execute correctly, even if the trade loses. You feel discomfort when you break rules, even if the trade wins. Over time, the brain rewires to value discipline above randomness. This creates emotional stability because discipline is always within your control while outcome is not. The second step is to build rituals that reinforce detachment. Journaling is the most powerful tool here. After every trade, you record what rule you followed, where you deviated, and what you felt. You grade the trade on process, not P&L. This repetitive act reinforces the separation of self from outcome. Over weeks and months, the habit conditions your mind to see trades as data rather than judgments. Another ritual is verbal self-talk. Before entering a position, you say to yourself, "The outcome is irrelevant, only execution matters." This primes the brain to anticipate detachment before emotions are triggered. The third step is to expect emotional resistance. Detachment feels unnatural at first because human identity is naturally linked to performance in most areas of life. In school, grades reflect intelligence. In sports, scores reflect ability. In careers, promotions reflect competence. Our brains are wired to treat outcomes as identity markers. Trading is unique because outcomes are probabilistic. This is why detachment feels counterintuitive. You must remind yourself daily that trading is not like school, sports, or career competitions. It is a statistical game. To win it, you must detach identity from randomness. There are predictable obstacles to detachment. One is revenge trading. When identity is fused to outcome, a loss feels like an attack. The impulse is to fight back immediately to restore self-worth. Detachment neutralizes this impulse because a loss is no longer personal. Another obstacle is overconfidence. When identity is fused to outcome, a string of wins inflates ego and leads to reckless behavior. Detachment neutralizes this by treating wins as neutral data, not validation. A third obstacle is paralysis. Fear of being wrong can freeze the amateur trader from taking valid trades. Detachment dissolves this fear by reframing the trade as a process test rather than an identity test. The benefits of detachment are profound. It creates emotional stability across sequences of trades. It allows consistency in execution regardless of short-term variance. It removes the need for external validation and replaces it with internal standards. It transforms the trader from reactive participant to disciplined operator. Most importantly, it protects mental capital. The constant self-criticism and ego inflation of attachment drain psychological energy. Detachment conserves it for decision-making and process improvement. Detachment also opens the door to continuous learning. When outcomes are personal, mistakes are avoided or rationalized because they feel like threats. When outcomes are data, mistakes are studied and corrected because they are opportunities. Detachment allows honest feedback. It makes you a student of the market rather than a prisoner of your ego. Over time, this accelerates development. Each loss becomes tuition, not trauma. Each win becomes reinforcement of discipline, not inflation of ego. Ultimately, detachment is not about caring less. It is about caring correctly. You care deeply about your process, your discipline, your execution. You do not care about the outcome of any single trade because it is outside your control. You build a professional identity rooted in consistency rather than randomness. This identity is unshakable because it does not rise and fall with variance. It endures. Detachment is therefore the first principle of the professional system because it provides the emotional foundation. Without detachment, every other principle is compromised by ego reactions. With detachment, the rest of the system can function smoothly, unaffected by the noise of individual outcomes. Probabilistic thinking is the recognition that the market is not a puzzle to be solved, but a field of uncertainty to be navigated. Every trade is a wager with an unknown outcome. No matter how strong the setup, no matter how perfect the alignment of signals, the result can never be guaranteed. The amateur mind resists this truth. It seeks certainty, prediction, and control. The professional mind embraces probabilities. It accepts uncertainty as the natural environment of trading and builds systems designed to exploit statistical advantage over large samples rather than chase accuracy in single events. To think probabilistically is to frame every decision as part of a distribution. A setup with a positive expectancy might win 55% of the time with an average reward that exceeds average risk. Over one trade, the outcome could be a win or a loss. Over 10 trades, you might win only 4 and lose 6. Over 100 trades, the edge will reveal itself. The amateur mind looks at the single trade and panics when it loses. The professional mind looks at the series and stays calm because the probability remains intact. This difference in framing is the essence of the principle. The shift to probabilistic thinking begins with language. Language shapes thought, and thought shapes emotion. When you say, "This trade will win," you program your brain to expect certainty. When it loses, you experience shock, frustration, and betrayal. When you say this trade has favorable odds, you program your brain to expect variability. A loss then confirms probability rather than violates it. Over time, changing language rewires perception. Every statement about trading must be probabilistic, never absolute. Instead of saying the market will go up, you say the market has a higher probability of rising given these conditions. This subtle adjustment dissolves attachment and prepares you for any outcome. The second layer of probabilistic thinking is expectancy. Expectancy is the mathematical measure of edge, the average result you can expect over a series of trades. It is calculated as win rate times average win minus loss rate times average loss. A system with 40% wins can be highly profitable if average wins are much larger than average losses. A system with 70% wins can be unprofitable if average losses dwarf wins. The amateur mind obsesses over accuracy. The professional mind obsesses over expectancy. This focus reframes success. Missing a trade or losing one does not matter if expectancy remains positive across the series. The trader is no longer chained to outcome accuracy but anchored in long-term mathematics. The third layer is variance. Variance is the natural fluctuation around expected results. Even with a system that wins 55% of the time, you may lose 10 trades in a row. This is not proof that the system is broken. It is simply variance. The amateur mind interprets variance emotionally as failure. The professional mind interprets variance statistically as normal distribution. This shift protects against system hopping, the constant search for the perfect strategy. Probabilistic thinkers accept that drawdowns are inevitable. They survive them by managing risk and trusting the edge, rather than abandoning the process. The fourth layer is sample size. Probability only reveals itself over large numbers. One coin toss is noise. 100 tosses reveal the distribution. In trading, the amateur evaluates edge after 2 or 3 trades, declaring victory or disaster prematurely. The professional evaluates after 50 or 100 trades, understanding that probability requires volume. This perspective creates patience. It stops the endless cycle of changing methods and chasing holy grails. The professional knows that edge is proven over samples, not anecdotes. Applying probabilistic thinking requires discipline in both analysis and execution. Analysis means testing strategies over historical data and live samples to calculate expectancy. Execution means committing to play the edge consistently without emotional interference. The professional does not stop after a string of losses if expectancy remains intact. The professional does not double-size recklessly after a string of wins. Both extremes distort probability. The application of this principle is calm adherence to edge across sequences. One of the greatest obstacles to probabilistic thinking is the human brain itself. The brain craves certainty and closure. It hates ambiguity. This is why traders fall for predictions, gurus, and magical indicators. They want the comfort of certainty in an uncertain world. Probabilistic thinking feels unsatisfying because it never promises outcome, only odds. The trader must retrain the brain to find satisfaction in following the edge rather than in being right. This is uncomfortable at first, but liberating over time. It shifts the emotional reward system from prediction to execution. The benefits of probabilistic thinking are profound. It eliminates fear of being wrong because wrong is expected in a distribution. It eliminates overconfidence because winning streaks are recognized as variance, not genius. It creates stability because you no longer overreact to short-term outcomes. It builds resilience because you can endure losing sequences without abandoning the system. Most importantly, it aligns your mindset with reality. The market is uncertain. The professional mind that accepts this will thrive where the amateur mind that denies it will implode. Probabilistic thinking also transforms risk management. When you know that any single trade can lose, you size positions conservatively. You risk only a small percent per trade because you expect sequences of losses. This protects capital and ensures survival. The amateur mind risks heavily on single trades because it expects certainty. When that certainty fails, accounts are destroyed. Probability-based risk management ensures that no single event can end the game. Survival becomes guaranteed, and profitability becomes a function of playing enough hands. Ultimately, probabilistic thinking is about humility. It is the admission that you do not control outcomes, only actions. It is the acceptance that randomness will always exist, but that you can align with it rather than fight it. It is the recognition that your job is not to predict the market, but to execute edge repeatedly with discipline. This humility, paradoxically, creates confidence. The professional is confident not because they know what will happen, but because they know they can handle whatever happens. That is true mastery. Probabilistic thinking is the second principle of the professional system because it defines the lens through which all decisions are made. Without it, detachment collapses because ego demands certainty. Without it, process orientation fails because outcomes distort rules. Without it, responsibility is diluted because blame shifts to variance. With it, the entire system coheres. You stop chasing accuracy and start pursuing expectancy. You stop fearing losses and start managing distributions. You stop pretending the market is predictable and start thriving within its uncertainty. This is the architecture of professionalism, a mind that sees in probabilities, acts in probabilities, and lives in probabilities. Process orientation is the anchor of professionalism. It is the principle that transforms trading from a random series of emotional reactions into a disciplined practice. To be process-oriented is to make the system, not the outcome, your highest priority. This principle rewires the question at the core of every decision. The amateur asks, will this trade make money? The professional asks, am I following my process? That single shift defines the difference between fragility and resilience, between gambling and operating, between short-lived luck and sustainable performance. At its core, process orientation is about control. You cannot control the market. You cannot control outcomes. But you can control how you prepare, how you execute, and how you review. These are your domains of influence. Everything else is noise. The amateur wastes energy trying to control outcomes, hoping, fearing, and reacting. The professional conserves energy by focusing only on what can be controlled. This focus builds consistency because it removes dependency on randomness. A process in trading is a structured framework. It includes routines, rules, and review mechanisms. A pre-market routine ensures that you approach the session with clarity and readiness. Rules define your entry criteria, your risk management, and your exit conditions. A journaling and review system closes the loop, allowing you to extract feedback and refine execution. Together, these components form a cycle: prepare, execute, review, improve. The amateur skips or distorts this cycle, driven by emotion and impulse. The professional repeats it with precision, day after day, trade after trade. To understand why process orientation matters, consider the nature of variance. Even a system with positive expectancy will experience sequences of losses. Without process, these losses create panic and deviation. The trader abandons the method, changes strategy, or sizes up recklessly to recover. With process, losses are expected and managed. The trader follows the rules regardless of outcome, knowing that edge reveals itself only across a series. Process orientation provides the discipline to stay the course when variance strikes. It is the shield against randomness. Applying process orientation begins with clarity. You must define your process explicitly. Vague intentions like "I will trade trends" or "I will be disciplined" are insufficient. You need concrete rules: entry signals, position sizing, stop levels, and exit triggers. You need a checklist that confirms readiness before every trade. You need a journaling system that captures decisions and emotions. Without this clarity, process orientation is just an idea. With clarity, it becomes operational. The second step is commitment. A process is worthless if you abandon it under stress. Commitment means executing rules even when emotions scream otherwise. It means cutting losses when the stop hits, even if you feel certain the market will reverse. It means skipping trades when setups are not valid, even if you are bored or restless. This commitment transforms process into discipline. It builds trust in yourself because you prove that you can act consistently regardless of emotion. The third step is feedback. A process must evolve, but only through structured review. After every session, you examine trades not to celebrate wins or lament losses, but to assess alignment with process. Did you follow your rules? Where did you deviate? What emotions interfered? This feedback loop strengthens discipline and gradually refines the system. It prevents stagnation without succumbing to impulsive changes. The amateur reacts to every loss by altering methods. The professional adjusts only after analyzing a meaningful sample. Feedback turns process into a living system. One of the greatest obstacles to process orientation is boredom. The amateur craves excitement. Following a checklist feels mechanical. Waiting for valid setups feels slow. Recording trades feels tedious. But boredom is not a weakness. It is a signal that you are finally operating outside of dopamine addiction. The professional embraces boredom because it means discipline is replacing impulse. In fact, boredom is the environment where process thrives. Excitement is the environment where it dies. Another obstacle is overconfidence. After a series of wins, the amateur abandons process, believing intuition is superior. This leads to reckless entries, oversized positions, and eventual collapse. Process orientation prevents this by requiring adherence regardless of outcomes. You follow the checklist whether you are winning or losing. You execute rules whether you feel confident or doubtful. Process is the constant, emotion is the variable. By anchoring to process, you eliminate swings of overconfidence and despair. The benefits of process orientation extend beyond consistency. It creates emotional neutrality. When you define success as following the process, outcomes lose power over your emotions. A losing trade executed perfectly is a success. A winning trade executed poorly is a failure. This inversion rewires the brain. You are no longer at the mercy of randomness. You are evaluated by controllable actions. This shift reduces anxiety, guilt, and frustration. It creates confidence rooted in behavior rather than chance. Process orientation also accelerates mastery. By recording and reviewing trades, you create a database of experience. Patterns of strength and weakness emerge. Over time, you refine rules, sharpen discipline, and improve execution. The amateur cycles endlessly without progress because they do not measure or review. The professional compounds growth by systematically learning from every action. Process turns randomness into structured feedback. Mastery is no longer accidental. It becomes engineered. Ultimately, process orientation is about building a machine. You are designing an internal system that operates predictably regardless of external chaos. The market can spike, reverse, or drift. News can shock, volatility can surge, emotions can flare. None of this matters because the machine keeps running. The process executes. The review captures. The refinement continues. This machine is what carries you through variance to long-term profitability. Without it, you are naked against randomness. With it, you are armored with discipline. Process orientation is the third principle of the professional system because it operationalizes the other principles. Detachment is reinforced by measuring process instead of outcomes. Probabilistic thinking is reinforced by executing edge consistently across samples. Responsibility is reinforced by reviewing and refining your own behavior. Without process, the other principles collapse into ideas. With process, they become practice. The professional system is therefore not just a philosophy. It is a daily routine, a checklist, a journal, and a cycle. It is the relentless commitment to process above all else. Radical responsibility is the principle that completes the professional framework. It is the uncompromising stance that every result in trading is yours to own. Not in the sense of blame or shame, but in the sense of ownership and empowerment. The amateur mind is quick to deflect. Losses are blamed on market makers, on sudden news, on manipulation, on brokers, on bad luck. Wins are credited to intuition or brilliance. This shifting of accountability keeps the trader stuck in illusion. Responsibility is fragmented, and therefore growth is impossible. The professional mind refuses this fragmentation. Every trade, win or loss, is a mirror of choices. Radical responsibility means accepting that your results are the product of your actions, your system, your discipline, and nothing else. This principle is radical because it allows no escape. It does not permit excuses. It does not leave space for victimhood. Even when an external event shocks the market, the responsibility lies in how you manage risk, how you position size, how you execute its stops. The professional knows that uncertainty is not an anomaly. It is the environment. To blame the environment for being itself is absurd. Radical responsibility reframes every event as feedback. If volatility stopped you out, the issue is risk management. If slippage hurt your entry, the issue is execution protocols. If news created chaos, the issue is exposure to unscheduled events. By owning everything, you gain the power to change everything. The amateur resists this principle because it feels heavy. Accepting responsibility for every outcome seems overwhelming, but in truth, it is liberating. Blame chains you to external forces you cannot control. Responsibility chains you only to yourself, which you can control. Once you accept that your results are yours, you stop waiting for conditions to change and start changing yourself. This is why radical responsibility is not self-criticism. It is self-empowerment. It transforms the narrative from "I lost because the market was unfair" to "I lost because my system was unprepared." One story is hopeless, the other is actionable. Applying radical responsibility begins with honesty. Journaling must be mercilessly accurate. No euphemisms, no rationalizations. If you broke a rule, you write that you broke a rule. If you overleveraged, you write that you overleveraged. If you ignored a stop, you write that you ignored it. This raw honesty is painful at first because it strips away illusions, but it is the foundation of improvement. You cannot refine what you refuse to see. The professional journal becomes a mirror that reflects truth without distortion. The second step is reframing mistakes as feedback. Radical responsibility does not mean punishing yourself for every error. It means mining every error for lessons. When you accept ownership, you shift from self-blame to self-improvement. A broken rule is not proof of failure, but evidence of where discipline must be strengthened. A poorly sized trade is not shame, but data showing where process must be adjusted. Every misstep becomes a resource. This mindset transforms losses into tuition fees rather than traumas. The amateur avoids mistakes because they wound ego. The professional studies mistakes because they fuel growth. The third step is applying responsibility to wins as well as losses. This is where many traders falter. They own their losses reluctantly but claim their wins eagerly. Radical responsibility requires balance. A win that violates process is still a failure. A loss that honors process is still a success. By owning both sides with equal rigor, you prevent ego inflation and maintain objectivity. Wins must be dissected for rule alignment just as losses are. This prevents the dangerous illusion that breaking rules is acceptable if profitable. The professional understands that luck can reward bad behavior temporarily, but only discipline sustains profitability long-term. Another layer of radical responsibility is preparation. If you are unprepared, the responsibility is yours. If you trade tired, distracted, or emotionally unstable, the responsibility is yours. If your internet fails without backup, the responsibility is yours. If your platform glitches without contingency, the responsibility is yours. This may sound extreme, but it is the only mindset that ensures control. By assuming that everything is your responsibility, you create redundancy, preparation, and resilience. You stop outsourcing your future to luck and start building it on discipline. The greatest obstacle to radical responsibility is ego. Ego prefers excuses because they preserve self-image. Admitting fault feels like admitting weakness. But the paradox is that strength is built only through admission. Every excuse delays growth. Every acceptance accelerates it. The ego must be humbled before the system can evolve. The professional embraces this humility. They understand that responsibility is not a burden, but a privilege. To be responsible is to be in charge of destiny. The benefits of radical responsibility are transformative. It eliminates helplessness. No matter what happens, you have agency. It eliminates complacency. Success does not make you blind because you still own your flaws. It eliminates repetition of mistakes because every mistake is confronted and corrected. It creates resilience because you stop wasting energy on blame and focus entirely on adaptation. Most importantly, it creates integrity. You become someone whose word and action align, someone who does not lie to themselves. That integrity compounds into confidence, discipline, and trust in your own system. Radical responsibility also integrates with the other principles seamlessly. Detachment from outcome allows you to own results without ego wounds. Probabilistic thinking allows you to accept variance without excuses. Process orientation gives you a framework to apply responsibility concretely. Responsibility binds them all together by ensuring that you never escape accountability. Without it, detachment can drift into apathy, probabilistic into rationalization, process into rigidity. With it, the entire system remains honest and adaptive. Ultimately, radical responsibility is about maturity. It is the recognition that trading is not about battling the market, but about mastering yourself. The amateur treats themselves as a passenger in a storm, tossed by external forces. The professional treats themselves as the captain of the ship, steering through the storm. The storm cannot be controlled, but the response can. Radical responsibility is the captain's mindset. It is what makes professionalism sustainable. This principle is placed last because it is the glue. Detachment clears ego. Probabilistic thinking aligns with reality. Process orientation structures action. But without responsibility, all of these can be bypassed by excuses. Radical responsibility ensures that the system is lived, not just known. It forces constant alignment between principle and practice. It guarantees that every deviation is confronted, and it builds the character required to sustain professionalism in the long run. To embrace radical responsibility is to stop outsourcing your future to luck, to excuses, or to external forces. It is to declare that your results are your creation. That declaration is the foundation of mastery. The professional trading mindset cannot remain theory. It must be installed as a functioning operating system. This requires a deliberate plan of action, structured like the installation of new software. The amateur system cannot be patched, it must be replaced. The following framework provides the installation guide. System check through journaling, pre-market routine, execution rules, and post-market debugging. Each step ensures that the professional system is not just understood intellectually, but embedded behaviorally. The first step is the system check. A trader must treat the mind and process as a machine that requires diagnostic review. Journaling is the tool for this diagnostic. It is not merely a record of trades, but a mirror for behavior. Each entry must capture the setup taken, the rule alignment, the emotions experienced, and the reasons for deviation if they occurred. Over time, this creates a data set that exposes patterns. The amateur may rely on memory, which distorts. The professional relies on records, which reveal truth. System checks expose whether detachment is practiced, whether probabilistic thinking is held, whether process orientation is followed, and whether responsibility is owned. The journal is the evidence of the system's integrity. Without it, illusions persist. With it, clarity emerges. The second step is the pre-market routine. Trading begins long before the first entry. The professional mind is primed through preparation. A pre-market routine has two layers, technical and psychological. The technical layer includes reviewing key levels, confirming signals, checking news, and setting alerts. The psychological layer includes calming the mind, affirming principles, and visualizing execution without attachment. This routine is not optional. It is the ignition sequence that aligns the trader with process before exposure to chaos. The amateur drifts into the market distracted, carrying emotional baggage from life. The professional enters with focus, carrying only readiness. The routine ensures that discipline begins before risk is even taken. The third step is execution in real time. This is where principles meet resistance. The market will tempt with impulsive moves, trigger fear with volatility, and seduce with opportunity outside of plan. Execution rules must be absolute. Entries are taken only when criteria are met. Position sizes are predetermined by risk management, never altered in the heat of emotion. Stops are placed immediately and never moved further away. Targets are respected or exits are rule-based. During execution, the mantra is simple: follow the process. The amateur negotiates with rules mid-trade. The professional executes rules without negotiation. Real-time discipline is the battlefield where the old software fights hardest. Every decision becomes a test. Ego versus system, impulse versus process, excuse versus responsibility. Each time the system wins, the new operating software embeds deeper. The fourth step is post-market debugging. Every session must end with review. This is not casual reflection, but structured analysis. The journal is updated with detailed notes. Each trade is graded on rule adherence, not outcome. Deviations are highlighted, emotions identified, and corrective measures written. Debugging transforms mistakes into upgrades. Just as software engineers release patches after bugs are found, traders must patch behavior after flaws are exposed. The amateur hides from mistakes or rationalizes them away. The professional confronts them directly and installs corrections. This debugging cycle ensures continuous improvement. The system becomes stronger with every error faced honestly. These 4 steps form a loop: system check, pre-market routine, execution, post-market debugging. Together, they create a closed circuit of discipline. The loop ensures that professionalism is not a one-time choice, but a daily practice. The amateur system thrives on randomness and avoidance. The professional system thrives on structure and confrontation. This loop guarantees that the professional mindset becomes automatic through repetition. The obstacles to this plan are predictable. Journaling feels tedious. Pre-market routines feel unnecessary. Execution rules feel restrictive. Debugging feels uncomfortable. Each resistance is a signal of the amateur protocols fighting for survival. The professional recognizes this and pushes through. Over time, what once felt unnatural becomes second nature. Journaling becomes clarity. Routines become grounding. Rules become freedom. Debugging becomes growth. The discomfort fades as the system installs. The benefits of this action plan are measurable. Journaling builds accountability and exposes blind spots. Pre-market routines create consistency and reduce impulsive entries. Execution rules protect capital and enforce discipline. Post-market debugging accelerates learning and prevents repeated mistakes. Together, they create compounding growth. Each day adds another layer of professionalism. Each loop strengthens the architecture. Over months and years, the difference becomes exponential. What once was chaos becomes structure. What once was gambling becomes a business. What once was fragile becomes resilient. This plan also integrates seamlessly with the 4 principles. Detachment is practiced through journaling and review. Probabilistic thinking is reinforced by framing outcomes as distributions in the journal. Process orientation is embodied in routines and checklists. Radical responsibility is exercised in debugging. The plan is not separate from the principles. It is the practical embodiment of them. Without the plan, the principles remain concepts. With the plan, they become lived reality. Ultimately, this action plan is about building trust. Trust in yourself is not created by promises or intentions. It is created by consistent behavior. Each time you journal honestly, follow a routine, execute rules, or debug mistakes, you prove to yourself that you are professional. Over time, this trust compounds. You stop doubting whether you can stay disciplined because you have evidence that you do. This self-trust is the foundation of confidence. It is unshakable because it is earned, not imagined. Trading will always be uncertain. No plan eliminates randomness, but this plan eliminates fragility. It creates a system that can withstand randomness and still produce consistent behavior. It transforms trading from a gamble into a discipline. The amateur drifts into the market unprepared, reacts impulsively, and hides from mistakes. The professional prepares, executes, and refines. This difference is decisive. It is the line between failure and mastery. The action plan ensures that professionalism is not just a philosophy, but a habit lived every single day. You have now walked through the architecture of a professional trading mind. You have seen the faulty protocols of the amateur system, the validation loop, the pain avoidance reflex, the dopamine chase cycle. You have seen how these create predictable self-sabotage, how they drain capital and confidence, and how they trap traders in endless cycles of frustration. You have also seen the turning point, the realization that the old system cannot be patched, that it must be uninstalled. And you have been given the blueprint of the professional framework: detachment from outcome, probabilistic thinking, process orientation, and radical responsibility. Finally, you now hold a practical installation guide, a daily plan of journaling, routines, disciplined execution, and post-market debugging. Together, this is a complete operating system designed to make you consistent, resilient, and professional. This journey is not abstract. It is not motivational fluff. It is an engineering process for the mind. Each principle is a component. Each practice is an installation step. Each day you run the loop, the system becomes stronger. At first, it will feel heavy. Detachment feels cold. Probability feels uncertain. Process feels restrictive. Responsibility feels uncomfortable. But over time, these become natural. They become automatic. They become your default operating mode. This is how you reprogram the mind to thrive in an environment of randomness. This is how you build professionalism from the ground up. Now the choice is yours. You can continue operating on the amateur software, chasing validation, avoiding pain, and pursuing dopamine highs. That path leads only to exhaustion, inconsistency, and eventual failure. Or you can install the professional system, grounded in principles and executed through daily practice. That path does not promise perfection, but it guarantees durability. It guarantees growth. It guarantees that your results will reflect discipline rather than randomness. This choice is not about intelligence or talent. It is about commitment. Are you willing to uninstall the old system and run the new one without compromise? If you are serious about this transformation, take action now. Start by building your journal today. Write down every trade, every emotion, every deviation. Commit to a pre-market routine tomorrow. Design your checklist and follow it before you open a single chart. Execute your next trade with full adherence to your rules. No negotiation, no excuse. At the end of the session, debug your performance honestly. These are not suggestions. They are the steps that install the system. Repeat them daily, and the amateur software will fade. The professional framework will become your operating mode. Before you leave this video, take one more step. Like this video if you found value in it. Subscribe to this channel, Flow State Trading, and turn on notifications so that you never miss the next blueprint. Comment below with the biggest psychological obstacle you face. Is it the need to be right, the fear of loss, or the chase for excitement? Share it because naming the obstacle is the first step to dismantling it. And stay tuned for the next video where we will break down the exact structure of a pre-market routine that primes your mind for neutrality and discipline before the session even begins.